are releasing my Stoic tutorials. I'm looking for some studio headphones. Also, do you have advice for finding vocalists? I'm sinking slowly. How important is audio editing? If you're not doing it and you don't feel the need to do it, don't do it. That's weird. Why would you have that many? That's just stupid. Lawyer before the first contract. What's the best strategy to sign a release on Mousetrap? What are your thoughts on the new Massive X synth? Hey guys, welcome to the Kane audio vlog. It is Friday. It's actually Friday. I'm recording this on a Friday, back to normality-ish. So it's time for another Ask Me Anything. Usual rules apply. Comment anything you want below this video and I'll get back to you in next week's video. Before I go on to last week's video and read the comments there, house admin. I do write it down now, so I should have some stuff. Oh yeah, there's a few things. Right, first of all, before I even start reading that, apologies if I am sweating profusely. If you're offended by sweat, then turn this video off now, because I've just had to close the door and the windows and everything, and the UK is in the middle of a heat wave at the minute. Luckily, today is not so bad. It's like 24-25 degrees centigrade. Yesterday it was 36, and genuinely there were a couple of things I had to do yesterday which meant closing the door and windows literally for like 2 minutes, and my entire body was just... Let's not go there. Anyway, welcome. House admin, before I get on with last week's video, what have we got? Oh yeah, of course. So today is the day that Sonic Academy are releasing my Stoic tutorials, I hope. That's what I was told earlier this week. Today is the day. So hopefully it's out. In fact, let me check. It wasn't out earlier. No, I don't see it there yet. But that's fine. It should be out later today, I guess. When it is out, chances are it will have come out by the time I upload this video, so there should be a link below this video, hopefully. So yeah, it's the usual deal with Sonic Academy, 10-part series. I go through the making of Stoic, or I remake Stoic from start to finish, and I start right at the start explaining how I came about the chords and the chord phrase and my sort of way of thinking behind those intervals and those chords, and a very sort of specific reasoning behind it all being named Stoic and the chords and everything. So yeah, so I talk about all of that, and then I go through sort of building up the melodies around it. Obviously all the drums, how to get the bass, the way that bass cuts through, almost cutting through the drums. Yeah, there's loads of stuff in there. It's a really good tutorial course. I think it's my best one yet. So yeah, for anyone who has seen my previous tutorials, if you did enjoy them, then hopefully you'll really enjoy this one, because like I said, I'm really proud of this one. So yeah, there's that. Next, I need to mention Patreon. I mentioned it last week and thanked the one or two people for having signed up to that, and I'm genuinely grateful. Another one signed up last week, which is great. Thank you very much to you. If you guys do want a shout out on this YouTube channel, let me know, because I never know, do people want to or not want to, so there we go. However, I have now set it up with a $10 is it a donation? Submission? Oh, whatever it is. For $10, you will get 4 of my sample packs, which are from my Quantum Loops label, which has ceased trading, at least for now. and for the foreseeable future. So they may be pretty exclusive packs now, but they are my 4 favourite. There's a Tech House one, or sorry, Tech Prog it's called. So lots of big melodies. There's a techno one, so lots of wicked drums, and Transitions, which is full of transitions, effects, sweeps, risers, whatever. And my absolute favourite, which was the first ever pack we put out, called Drum Construction. It is literally hundreds of kick drums, snare drums, claps, hats, open hats, closed hats, reverb kicks, kits, just single shots basically of drum sounds, more than you can shake a stick at. So yeah, so that's what you get for your $10. So hopefully you get your money's worth there. And I think that is it for house admin. So I can't remember when I last updated my Spotify playlist. That's usually another thing I mention here. I think I did it last week and mentioned it last week. I'm so confused at the moment in what day of the week it is. I nearly forgot about this video even. Right, so on with last week's video. Let's have a look. I can see my microphone's pointing in the wrong direction. Hopefully that's fixed it. Right. So, starting at the top of last week's video, I'm already losing my voice, apologies. Nathan Zaskarinskis, hey Dom, thanks for keeping up with these AMAs, they're really useful. I could do with some advice. I'm looking for some studio headphones and was going to get a set of Beyerdynamics, but looking at them there's a few models with varying ohms, anything from 32 to 250. Does the ohms have any impact on sound quality, or is this just the power required to drive them? So officially speaking, yes, they do have an impact on frequency response, because a driver that requires more power, so a greater ohmage, more resistance in the magnet, is generally speaking going to give a flatter response. Generally. I'm saying all this very slowly and carefully because it's not always true, and a lot of manufacturing companies use that kind of knowledge as an advertising scam. So yeah, so I don't want to say it's a definite thing. However, the Beyerdynamics, when I tried them all out, there wasn't a huge difference. You could hear a difference, and definitely the higher ohmage ones were a flatter response. But I think if you're using an EQ in your master chain to adapt for that, something like SonarWorks or whatever, then that's easily sorted anyway. And actually I felt like you really needed some fairly substantial power for the high ohmage ones. You know, you needed a really good headphone amp to get them working. So I would probably recommend going for the mid-range, and failing that, if you're not going to use any kind of headphone amp, then I would suggest probably going for the low ohmage of the 32 ohms is probably good enough, to be honest. So yeah, I don't think there's that much of a difference that you need to worry too much about it. But if, for example, you want to be able to listen to something on your phone, then definitely go for the 32 ohms, because you know, an iPhone or Samsung or whatever, a mobile phone is not going to be able to power a hefty pair of headphones. So there's things like that to bear in mind. If you're only using it on, say, an Audient thing that has a built-in preamp, then you're fine. If you're having a dedicated headphone amp, then go for the high ohmage ones. Yeah, so I guess that's that. Also, do you have advice for finding vocalists? I would like some vocals for a few tracks I've got in the works, but unsure how to go about finding someone. So there are a few websites I won't mention because, first of all, I can't remember the names of, and also they weren't great when I've used them. Actually, no, I will name one that could be good. Soundbetter.com. There may be some vocalists on there. I've not used it for vocalists, but I use it as an engineer. People hire me through that, and that seems to work quite well. There seems to be some really professional people on there. Other than that, like I say, there are some sites out there for finding vocalists, and I've only ever tried a couple a long time ago, and they weren't successful at all. So I can't think of any to really recommend. Yeah, it's a tricky one. I feel your pain because I'm looking for vocalists myself at the moment, and I think it's easy to find people who can sing. I think it's less easy to find people who can sing well. It's definitely a lot harder to find people who can not only sing and sing well, but actually have enough basic equipment to record their own, even if it's just demo draft version or whatever. So it is a tricky thing finding vocalists. So I don't think I really have much advice for you in that area, if I'm honest. Yeah, do you know what? There's a website out there that is for finding vocalists, and I can't remember the name of it. If it comes to me during this video, I'll say it. In fact, if it comes to me after the video, then I'll post a link below this video, but I don't think it's going to come to me. My chair seems to have stopped working probably today. There we go. So if you're noticing I'm sinking slowly during the video, that's why. All of a sudden today, just every sort of 15-20 minutes, I notice my chair's sinking. Anyway, M. Jacob. Hi Dom, really appreciate you at your level spreading your knowledge with us. My question is, how important is audio editing in your productions? After bouncing tracks, because I mainly work in MIDI, usually don't even bounce track before mixdown. I guess I'm too lazy. I wouldn't say it's lazy. If you don't need to, you don't need to. If you don't want to, you don't want to. At the end of the day, it's all about what comes out the speakers. And do you think that audio editing is crucial for achieving similar sound as Jamie XX, Sleep Sound, Fortet, etc.? I've not heard huge amounts of either Jamie XX or Fortet, but I don't recall their sound being different to anyone else's in that genre, really. They're great producers, don't get me wrong, I'm not taking anything away from that. As far as audio editing, I mean, I think I'm assuming you're talking about it's kind of a vague description from my perspective, because audio editing is just so you get a MIDI clip, bounce it down to audio, and then chop it up or whatever. I mean, usually that's only done to save CPU. It doesn't come with a sound necessarily. The other reason it's done is if you're someone like Dada Life or Noisier or someone like that that does hugely complex sounds and stutters, more importantly, then you do audio editing because there's no latency involved. You don't have to deal with the latency of any VSTs or any plug-in delay compensation PDC issues that Ableton used to have. You'd bypass that. I know Dada Life, the guys there, I remember talking to them a long time ago about PDC issues with Ableton. So they'd sort of talk about that as a way of avoiding things. So I'm not aware of it being a particularly subjective production technique. I think it's more of like a workaround for stuff. For, like I say, for noisier Dada Life style productions, I can see it being very helpful for them because they do quick changes and quick edits and cuts and everything, and that kind of makes more sense to have it deal with it in audio than MIDI, because you can have a release time of 0 just by chopping the end off something. If you're not making that sort of music, I mean, Jamie XX and Fortet don't make that kind of music, so I can't see why it's of any benefit to them, if I'm honest. Yeah, I can't think of a single reason unless they just work on laptops or something. I don't know. So yeah, as far as it being crucial for achieving a similar sound, no way. No, I can't imagine audio editing is anything to do with their sound. I think their sound is because of their initial sound selection in the samples they use and whatever sample packs they go to or whatever it is. I would imagine they probably use some old drum machines and record bits and pieces. But moving it down to the audio side of editing, I guess for some people it's easier to manipulate. Again, it depends on what you're doing and how you're doing it. But if you're not doing it and you don't feel the need to do it, don't do it. It's not going to change your sound by bouncing stuff down to audio. The only time I've ever done it in my productions, funnily enough, did I do it in Stoic? Did I cover that in the tutorial? I'm not sure. I can't remember if I did it in Stoic, but whatever the case, sometimes when I use a certain synth for, especially if it's an analog synth like the Moog behind me, and you're recording, say, short, stabby 16th note bass line or something like that, and you'll notice, especially on an analog synth, a lot of digital synths will do it these days because they're trying to recreate the analog sound, but no two bass notes are exactly identical, and some come across sharper than others because of the starting point of the waveform at the beginning of the note. So you can lock those things, especially on digital. On the Moog Sub 37, I think you can lock it to, I think they call it re-trigger. So you restart the waveform at the press of a note to kind of bypass that. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't work in certain synths, sometimes you don't have an option. In those sorts of circumstances, and I'm looking for a really sharp bass note, then I'll bounce, I'll record maybe, 16 bars of that and bounce it down to audio and then pick out my favourite single note and use that as an audio sample. But again, this is all just workaround stuff for problems. So if you're not having those problems, then don't worry about it. I guess that's my advice. Ricky John, always so satisfying to hear the intro song to your AMAs. Hi Dom, great to hear you're releasing another tutorial on Sonic Academy. Just bought your mixing of Voices in My Head sometime midweek. I'm really enjoying it so far. Thank you. On that note, I've also watched Enamor's Ruby tutorial and a bunch of stuff from other people on YouTube, and there's a common theme I've noticed. Can't remember if I've asked this before. Sorry if I have. I wouldn't remember if you had. Some people seem to stack a whole lot of stuff to the high end, like 3 or 4 hi-hats, 3 more shakers, a handful of other effects, etc. Is this something you would typically try to avoid? I've only ever really used 1 or 2 hi-hats and the same amount of high-end percussion at once, but obviously I'm no pro. Have a great weekend. That's weird. Why would you have that many hi-hats? Okay, so I need some clarification on this. Are they using, let's say, 4 hi-hats and beat 1 is 1 hi-hat, beat 2 is a different hi-hat, beat 3 is a different hi-hat, which would kind of make sense, as though a drummer had a bunch of hi-hats and was playing, the various hi-hats in front of him. That could sound cool. If you're talking about someone stacking, yeah, you did use the word stack. People seem to stack a whole lot of stuff. Right, you've used the word stack. So I'm assuming 3, 4, 5 hi-hats on top of each other. That's just stupid, if I'm honest. Apologies to anyone that does that, and please tell me why you would do that. So I can understand people stack kick drums, for example, because kick drums kind of have 3 frequency bands, I suppose. You've got the low sub boom of a kick drum, you've got the mid punchy body of a kick drum, and you've got the high end transient, the attack of a kick drum. They're 3 very distinctive parts. So for example, you could have a big subby boomy 808 kick, grab that, stick a low pass filter on top of it, so you're just using that low end sub, and then you might grab a 909 kick because you like the body, the mid-range thud to that, and you'd stick maybe a bandpass filter on that to kill any low end so there's no interference, kill any high end, and then grab another, I don't know, some modern engineered kick and stick that on top, and that's your transient because you like the click, and then high pass filter that, blah 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 blah. Now you've got 3 kicks stacked on top of each other, all creating one kick, but not interfering with each other. They should hopefully be complementing each other. Now that I can totally understand. But when it comes to a hi-hat really is just a transient and a bit of noise up top. So I can't really understand why you would be stacking multiple hi-hats on top of each other. Maybe a shaker and a closed hi-hat, so you've got the transient of the hi-hat with the body of a shake. Anyway, I don't even want to call it body because it's not body, it's the extended sound of a shaker, I guess. I mean, that would kind of make sense, I guess. Yeah, so I can't see a single reason why that would be a good idea for anyone, if I'm honest. So I feel like that's what we call over-engineering, you know. And I know I've mentioned this before, where people stack synths on top of each other, and you guys might do it yourselves. You have, say, 5 different synths all playing the same notes or the same chords or whatever. And I always sort of say, if that's the case, and this may not always be true because there are exceptions, but if you need to perhaps review that and go, have I done this because maybe I've just got the wrong sound in the first place? And actually, if you go back and just mute the other 4, go back to the original one and just try some different presets, or maybe a different instrument or whatever, try something new, and you might find, oh, actually that's what I was looking for, that's the sound I wanted. If you're stacking 4 or 5 of anything on top of each other to try and get a particular sound, then you're probably doing the sound design wrong, and you just need to change to a different original sample, I think. Yeah, that's baffled me, I've got to be honest. 3 or 4 hi-hats, 3 more shakers, and a handful of other effects. I mean, that's like transient hell in my head. I feel like you'd have to then run them through a bunch of bus compressors to tame them, because the other thing to remember is hi-hats, and I love hi-hats, don't get me wrong, and anyone who's heard my music knows that to me a hi-hat is one of the most underrated instruments out there. I love the attack, the transient, the sharp cutting effect that a hi-hat has. And if I was to stack a bunch of them on top of each other, I'm then going to have to throw in a bunch of compressors and tame them and bring them all down. And it's just going to ruin the dynamics of a track. So, yeah. Someone give me an example of where that's been done, because I need to hear it in action. It's baffled me. Raphael, I don't want to sound greedy, Dom, but one important question that comes to mind, and this, I believe, it has a public utility connotation on it. Read more. Lawyer before the first contracts. Okay. You should get a lawyer before signing the first contract, question mark. Or maybe after the first 10. I know the income from selling tracks is almost nothing unless you reached a huge popularity and 1 million plays on Spotify, or constant #1 on Beatport, for example, is a common thing. But I wonder, it's clever to right at the start you have a lawyer to review the contracts and see if nothing kind of blocks you of your basic rights with your tunes. Like at one point you would have your track deleted from SoundCloud because the distributor or label have the final voice, and kind of ignored the platform and other unnecessary scenarios that would be avoided with a proper contract. At some point I saw Roger Sanchez suggesting to pay attention to mechanical royalties too. What would that be? Right, I'll get to that bit in a moment. We've got time, yes. Okay, so contracts, I have talked about it before, but I'll do it again because I couldn't tell you when I spoke about it before. I always say that if you can get a lawyer to look over contracts, then it is worth doing that. However, most record labels, most small record labels in particular, don't have their own lawyer, and they just copy paste other people's contracts. So it's kind of a tricky one, because really, if you got a lawyer to look over your contract with a record label, and the lawyer said, "Oh, take this bit out, that's terrible," or "change this," and you sent it back to that small record label, then chances are that small record label wouldn't have a lawyer to be able to reword it anyway, so you're kind of stuck with it. So there's that to bear in mind. So, I think all of these things are easier said than done. Sorry, that was someone at the door. Yeah, so where was I? Right. First, contracts. So there are things to look out for in contracts. So, for example, you want a time limit to be on a contract. As an artist, it's in your interest to make sure that every contract is time limited. When you sign a track to a label, it really shouldn't be for more than 5 years at the most. And that, that can be reviewed or renewed or whatever in 5 years' time. If the label still love it and you're happy with the label, yeah, sign another contract for another 5 years. There's nothing wrong with that. But most record labels these days try and get you to sign it forever. And I think that's a tricky one, because if you sign, something I've said to a lot of people before, a measure of your progress is to listen to some music you wrote last year and ask yourself, is this still good? Most people will go, no, I hate it now because it's old, because I wrote it a year ago and I've changed or whatever. Well, if you've signed that music over to a record label, then they could release it every year for the next 100 years, and every year you're going, oh, stop releasing it, and it's theirs. They can do anything they want with it. So I think we need to be careful of that. Aside from that, though, there are also lots of producers out there who maybe write all sorts of crap, and then they find their sound, and then they find that they suddenly become good or well known for something, and then they shoot to fame and fortune, and then all of a sudden they realise, oh, there's 100 other tracks that I don't like on the same name, and I want them removed, and it can become a bit of a nightmare. So there's a whole host of reasons that I think a time limit is worth having in a contract. That's certainly something I would look at, aside from the obvious percentages and stuff like that. So yeah, I would say the time limit is probably one of the most important things to look out for. Aside from that, I have a music lawyer who deals with my contracts, and she always recommended putting in a clause. I forget how it was worded, but it basically suggested that if I get a Billboard Top 40 or something within 6 months of signing this contract, but a Billboard Top 40 on a different track, on a different label, not the one for this contract, within 6 months of signing the contract, then I'm allowed to take it down, basically. And the reason is so that doesn't interfere with the success of another record and whatever, So a lot of these things are just about being fair, I guess. So that's kind of that. The other thing is pay attention to mechanical royalties. So mechanical royalties are almost a thing of the past, but they're not. So mechanicals are when, if your song is pressed onto CD or vinyl or anything like that, then a license needs to be paid for that to exist in physical format. And that's your mechanical royalty, basically. You also have your publishing royalty, which is the idea. So if someone does a cover version of the song, then they need to get clearance for that. And they're using your idea in the cover version. So it's slightly different. So the record label has the master recording, which is the final master. And they only own the rights to that. Now, a lot of record labels these days will also try and take your publishing as well. Personally, I always say don't do that. Don't go with that, because a record label shouldn't need your publishing. They're just trying to cash in on you, unless they have a proven track record of getting great publishing deals or synchronizations, or getting all their music on TV and film and radio and whatever else, and compilation CDs, which is where all the publishing royalties come from. You know, unless they have a proven history of that, then I wouldn't bother, because it's not part of the deal, basically. And for them to take 50% of that, if your track then does get used on TV or film or radio or whatever, well, that's nothing to do with the record label. That wasn't off their back, so why should they get 50% of whatever it is? So yeah, so there's a lot to look out for there. I can see you've also put coffee plus listening to Dom Kane AMA equals automatic win. One of the best ways to start the day and cure a hangover too. A hangover on a Friday? Oh no, it was a Saturday. Oh, fair enough, I'll let you have that. Fish milkshake. Hi Dom, sorry if it's been asked before. What's the best strategy to sign a release on Mousetrap? Assuming the track has got potential, how would one get in contact for consideration with the team? Thanks a lot for doing these. Keep it up. Yeah, I've kind of covered this before. Mousetrap, much like any other big record label, doesn't have an official A&R submission demo hotline type thing. And the reason for that is, when you think about it, pretty self-evident. If, you know, Mousetrap, for example, have hundreds of thousands of followers online, if they were to have, say, demos at mousetrap.com or whatever, you know, a demo email address, then just think about how many demos would get sent to that email address on a daily basis. They'd have to employ 15, 20 full-time staff just to listen to demos, and that's not feasible for anyone. You know, so it's exactly the same as, you know, the major record labels and stuff like that. They don't in fact, major record labels operate on a basis of if you're good enough, we'll hear about you through someone. And that's kind of how most big labels tend to work. So although that kind of sounds vague, it's actually really specific when you think about it. So my recommendation is, first of all, make good music. Get that music heard by people. And when I say people, I mean artists on that label. So for example, there are a couple of artists that have maybe hung around in the same Facebook groups or forums or whatever, something along those lines. You know, I get sent the odd demo on my Facebook page. Someone will send me a message going, hey, can you have a listen to this, blah blah blah. Sometimes I got time to listen, sometimes I don't have time to listen, but every now and then I will hear a track and I think, oh, this should be on Mousetrap, and I'll tell the A&R guys at Mousetrap and I'll go, have you seen this artist? And then suddenly that artist is now on their radar. That's kind of how it works. So, you know, if you think, for example, you've written a track that you think I would support in my gigs, then, you know, let me know and I'll listen to that track. And if I do start playing it in gigs and I think, you know, the crowd reaction is great and whatever, and then I find out that it's not even signed, then my first place would be to go to Mousetrap with that. So, and I think most artists are pretty similar. So it's not impossible. I know it sounds impossible and it sounds really difficult, but there's kind of a reason for it, and it's because, you know, if they put out a public email address, they would just be swamped with people. And let's be real here, doesn't matter what kind of music you make, they would be swamped with shit, you know, because I know when I had a public email address for demos, 90% of it wasn't even my style. Like, even if it was good music, it was the wrong genre or the wrong whatever. It was nothing like what I would play in a gig. People just spam stuff. So personally, I can totally understand. So yeah, so I guess, you know, a good place, in fact, you know, to get me to hear music, a good place is probably my Facebook group. I'll put a link below this video. Yeah, because I know a lot of the guys there, and that's another thing, I will plug the Facebook group, the Dom Kane Music Producer Group, because it is a great group. There's a great group of people in there, and you know, I've seen everyone sort of helping each other with mix advice and snare drum advice, whatever, you know, it's really good. So yeah, a huge big ups to everyone in that group. Yes, FanFan87. Hey Dom, thanks for the kind words. I will post with your authorization more music without spamming the group. There we go, talking to the group. That was one track FanFan87 posted that I mentioned last week. That was a really, really good track. This is the last thing I want to do and be considered as a spammer. So there we go. Just to be sure, I have more than one banger in my collection. My question this week, how do you keep the motivation to do these videos? Do you have some bad moments when you decide to record your weekly AMAs sometimes? I think I'm generally like probably an optimistic person in life anyway, so I kind of take things in my stride generally, so I don't, it's very, very rare that I get upset or stressed or whatever, and even when I'm stressed, it's usually good stress, just because I'm busy and I enjoy that. So yeah, but whereas, I mean, I guess an example like today, everybody's home from work, the whole family's in the house at the moment, so it kind of makes it a bit more awkward to record, but it's not impossible. You might hear the odd bang or something, or someone at the door or whatever, but that's about it. So it's not too much of an issue. Yeah, I can't think of a time where I've genuinely not wanted to do these AMAs. I really enjoy the questions. I think there's been one or two. There was one where actually a few of you got in touch asking if I was okay. And I think the week in between those two AMAs, was it a sore throat or something? I'd not been well. And I know a few of you got in touch asking if I was okay because I seemed a bit down or something. That's literally the only time I can remember anything not going smoothly, and even then I didn't even notice. I didn't even know, and it was only when people then asked me if I was okay, and I was like, yeah, I'm fine, what are you on about? And then it was only then I went, oh, I was ill last week. And yeah, so yeah, there we go. Raphael again, projects eating too much hard drive space. Hey Dom, if I'm not mistaken, at some point I read or saw that the Chemical Brothers has a process of turning everything into audio, so that it kind of compromises to what was already made and doesn't keep tweaking the music forever. I kind of started doing that more recently, so I can focus on the mixing phase of the process, and as you suggested, without overthinking the task too much. The dilemma with the Ableton freeze flatten function, basically transforming the channel into audio, for anyone reading this, it ends up with projects eating a good amount of space on the hard drive, something like 2.5 gig to 5 gig per project. Is this normal? You kind of face the same problem? Yeah, that's pretty normal. I don't. Actually, I do, don't I? Yeah, because I bounce all of mine pre-mix down. I bounce them out onto a different door. So, but I don't look at the space. Maybe I should. My chair's falling again. Yeah, I don't really think too much about it, to be honest, because funny enough, I was just explaining to someone earlier on. I've got sort of 4 or 5 hard drive bays in my computer, each of them between 4 and 8 terabytes, and I'm starting to run out of space now. So that's a lot of terabytes, and I tend not to delete old projects, especially not ones of mine. But I'll archive those hard drives off and then just get a new hard drive. And I hate to say it, it sounds a bit, I don't know, a bit greedy, but in this day and age, hard drives are not that crazy expensive. So for me personally, I think I'm getting to a point where I'll probably duplicate everything onto archivable hard drives and then just leave them stored away just in case. I think that's how I treat it. I haven't quite got to that point yet, so I'm still filling the hard drives up. But yeah, I think it's, and also I do it a lot with Bitwig. I file, save, collect all and save, or whatever it's called, where it basically captures every loop and sample and everything you've used within that project. I'll do that a lot as well, because if I then want to go to a different computer or a different studio and use a computer there, then I want to be able to load up the project and have all the samples in the right place being used at the right time. So yeah, so I use a lot of space, so I think that is perfectly normal. I don't see it as too much of a problem. If anything, making these videos, you can imagine the size. You know, the original import files are like, on average, probably anywhere between 10 and 15 gigs worth of raw video, and then when you're editing them, because you're layering in effects and whatever, and it's only bits and pieces, but that probably doubles it because it has to optimize media. And then when you export, you know, every file I upload to YouTube is probably 5 gig or whatever as well. So you know, and I'm doing these once or twice a week, so you're looking at 20-30 gig of video sometimes. Yeah, it uses a lot of space. But for these AMAs, for example, I just delete the old ones and the project files, because I figure, well, the video's on YouTube, and if it gets lost, it gets lost. It's not the end of the world, or not for me anyway. And yes, if you're a producer, I know you have to be prepared for this, but I ask myself if others tend to have projects eating that much space normally. One thing that has been saving me is using external hard drive for these files. Best wishes and keep rocking. Yeah, I mean, definitely, if you can use external hard drives to archive stuff off, so kind of what I was saying, you know, if you haven't used a project file in 6 months, 12 months, 18 months, then does it really need to be on your computer? Probably not. So you're better off archiving it and just sticking it on a different hard drive and just storing that. But yeah, I'll tell you what I do when I get to the point of just filling it up and needing to replace it. At the moment, I need a whole new computer system, so I've probably got bigger problems to worry about. And finally, Zombo. Nice video, Dom. What are your thoughts on the new Massive X synth? I really like it. Would love to know your opinions. Interesting you ask that. This very morning, can you see my computer screen just about? I've just started downloading a few bits and pieces from Complete 12 Ultimate something edition, because there's 73 things not installed, and I just wanted the Symphony Series Brass Ensemble, which is now installed, you'll be glad to know. And if I go to available, no, not installed products, there was Massive X amongst those. I haven't installed it because, and some of you will know about this already, and in fact tying in with what I literally just told you about my computer needing replacing, that's one of the reasons. Massive X will not install on my computer because I am running El Capitan version 10.11.6, and Apple won't let me update beyond that because Apple are Apple, and there we go. So they also won't let me do a playlist on Apple Music because it won't update to the latest version. They won't let me update iTunes. It won't let me update to the latest OS X on this computer because the chipset is apparently too old, even though everything runs smoothly and perfectly, which means that other softwares like things like Native Instruments and whatever are no longer supported. So thanks, Apple. Really appreciate that. So yeah, so I've just got to a point where I need to upgrade, but that's not going to happen anytime soon when I'm trying to save up for a new studio. So on that note, please do head to my Patreon and feel free to donate, because of course it's hugely appreciated, so that I can carry on doing these videos, because I do enjoy the AMAs, as I've said, and hopefully you guys get something out of it too. Yeah, I think that is it for this week. Apologies for me sweating profusely. It is ridiculously hot in here. I'm going to turn this off, have a cold drink, and open the doors and windows. And I hope you've all enjoyed. I'm not going to do a keyword this week because I just want to get out of here. I'll see you same time next week. Cheers.